The West created China.
In an increasingly precarious, multipolar world, how can we navigate the path to peace? I'm going to put that to Christina first.
Thanks, Roger. Easy question for a Sunday morning. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about what I do and what I see on the ground, and then maybe can broaden it out from there. I've been a war correspondent for 36 years. And when I started in the late 80s, the Berlin Wall was just coming down, apartheid was just ending in South Africa. There were lots of protest movements kicking out dictatorships in Latin America and the Philippines. Eastern Europe was becoming democratic. Everything felt like it was going in the right direction. Now it's obviously a very different world, as we were just hearing. I never imagined as a journalist that I would be covering a major land war in Europe. We also have a very complicated situation with Israel and Gaza, and more conflicts than at any time since the Second World War. So we have this really complicated world to navigate. We also have many people who have lost their homes, have become refugees, lots of humanitarian crises to deal with, not enough money to deal with it. So it feels a very important time to have strong international leadership, instead of which we seem to be at a time, probably the worst leadership that I can remember in my reporting life. And this situation where the US hegemony, which we had all got used to, is really coming to an end. I just came back from South Africa, actually, where they have elections this week. And it was very interesting talking to them about how they viewed this new world and being part of, I hate this expression, but the global South, and how they felt that the old colonial, post-colonial setup was really trying to just take advantage of countries like them and assume that they would just fall into line over things like Ukraine. And to them, they felt, why should they? That actually Russia and China, the new powers on the bloc, are much more relevant to them than the old colonial powers. So what I see happening is a sort of competing narrative going on. It's not just that US is declining and China is rising. You've got all these other medium-sized powers like Turkey, India, Brazil, Indonesia, Mexico rising. But you also just have this competition going on of the old sort of colonial powers, but then countries like Russia saying what we're doing is standing up against that. And I think Gaza has really complicated things because it makes the West look very hypocritical when we're saying that we're supporting Ukraine against Russian aggression, but then we're supporting Israel going into Gaza. So that's the world as I see it. Maybe we can
we will delve into that in some detail, I'm sure. Thanks, Christina. Well, let me put the same question. Is an increasingly precarious multipolar world, how can we navigate the path to peace, to Armen?
Well, thank you very much. Happy to see all of you, as you said, Sunday morning. And I think you described the world. And I'll try to put some points. Why do I think this has happened? Why do we live in a world in 2024-25 after 35 years of the great victory and the fall of the Berlin Wall, why we are here? So, 3 points. Point number one, and I would title that, How to Manage a Victory. Okay? If you're Manchester City, you want the Premier League. You know that next month or two, the new phase will start, and you have to fight from scratch. Okay? In fact, they were taught a lesson yesterday. Manchester United won the cup. So that's a lesson of a life. But when you are the only superpower in the world that you have won against the evil empire, Soviet Union, and capitalism and democracy were glorious. What's next? Is there another Manchester United or Arsenal? No. You look at you think that you are the victorious, everything is clear. Capitalism has definitely have won against communism, and basically it's a glorious victory of democracy. So the conclusion is, okay, we don't have to do anything. This is the end of the history. Mr. Fukuyama, Professor Fukuyama, wrote a book about the end of the history without recognizing or understanding that, in fact, this is the beginning of the history, not the end of the history, the beginning of the new world. And basically, allow yourself to be relaxed, not to do much, and so you think that if you just push the idea of capitalism, make Russia a capitalist state, tomorrow they will become democratic, the new states, or the Russia and other states. Or let's help China to become capitalist, and the capitalist China will become a democracy, and there will be no threat to us. Do you call it new liberalism, new conservatism, or new dreaming? I don't know. The West created China by investing huge amounts, not only in money, effort, construction, structure, but also know-how. There was no China 35 years ago. What was wrong? China staying communist. And the belief that the communist China becoming capitalist will become a democracy didn't work. And believing that communist Soviet Union or the Republic of Russia will become democratic fully the moment it became capitalism. There are many types of capitalism, oligarchic, state-owned, many. So Russia, or the former states, including my own state, Armenia, became capitalist, and it not necessarily brought democracy. In many places, democracy was a pretend democracy. That's point number one. Do you want me to say point number two?
Well, very briefly, but we are coming on to all those in detail. Actually, I mean, let's leave it there, because there's a lot to get into, and you've said
pleasure.
A great.
You are the boss.
I am. Well, we shall see.
This is the new world order.
Bring you in just so we have equal time on the first point.
We still have that bit of the rules-based order.
We try. Multipolar. In an increasingly precarious multipolar world, how can we navigate the path to peace?
It's great to be here. We are in a very different world, as Christina Lamb described. Much, much more complex. That is partly because of America's retreat, as she described, though not complete retreat. I think we should look at the part of the picture of this is the complexity of what's going on in America. Yes, it went into 2 wars which did not go to plan. That's an understatement. And struggled through the financial crisis of 2008 and lost a lot of support around the world for that. But at the same time, it has backed the creation of the internet and then AI, all kinds of technology that is reshaping the world for everyone at the same time. But out of its own complexities, it is also choosing to retreat. And now we find ourselves tugging at the US, regardless of what president is there, saying, but please don't forget about the defense of Europe. So it's a complex picture there, but it is one that has left the world and the order in the world very much open, up for grabs. And there are all kinds of countries which look at one bloc that is forming as China asserts its support for Russia, and indeed Iran on one side, and they look at the US, where they say, look, we don't think you've handled the past decades very well. And they say, why should we follow the rules that the US led the world to support after the Second World War? We weren't round the table when you were making those rules. You made them in your own interest, and you don't even follow them all the time. And it's time for us now to look around and shop, if you like, for allies of choice. And you've got lots and lots of countries doing exactly that, saying, why should we be bound by the alliances of the past or being told what to do? Now, I think if we want something of a rules-based order to continue, then, and if we want some of the values of the West to continue, individual liberty, human rights, and so on, then we have to, again, make the case for those rules and part of that is to show that the West will uphold those rules itself. And that is why this debate about double standards, which is an old debate going back decades, but why it is so highly charged at the moment. But I think it is still there to play for, that we can make the case for, if you like, Western values, but we have to show that the West will abide by those, even while acknowledging that China and others are full of hypocrisy themselves, but say that we are going to adhere to those rules more than in the past and draw in more country voices into making new rules in the future.
Bronwen, thank you. Well, let's pick up on that, and as we do in these debates, divide the whole thing into several parts and play off that. And let's start then with, is a multipolar world inherently unstable? Does global peace require an uncontested great power? Now, Christina, when you were talking, I was thinking about that period, and when Bronwen was mentioning it too, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when there seemed to be an uncontested space in a way, and yet, as we know, it was anything but stable. I mean, you reported on most of it. So that point about is multipolar more unstable than unipolar in that sense? So we saw what unipolar looked like, and frankly, it wasn't that stable.
I mean, unipolar is obviously simpler. Multipolar is a complicated world, and you see different people on different sides in different places. I think in the early 90s, it was still stable, and we saw democracy spreading to different places. It's really, to me, that the war in Iraq was a sort of turning point, and it's led to much more instability.
The first one or the second one?
The second one. Has led to much more kind of questioning of Western values. And as Bronwen was saying, I mean, if we're going to advocate for this rules-based order, we have to be seen to stand by it ourselves. And I think we've seen, certainly in the United States, but in this country too, in recent years, that we can't take democracy for granted either, right? We have to fight for it. It's not just in all these other places that we're seeing autocracy spreading. It worries me that you see a lot of surveys of young people, there are some young people here today, saying that they favour stronger leadership because they feel that they're being let down by democracies. So I think that's something, I suppose what I'm saying is apart from looking at who we ally with, we have to look very carefully at our own behaviour and what we're doing in our own countries.
But often that reflects, I suppose, who we're allied with as well. I mean, when countries traditionally found, during the Cold War, the US and its allies to be their supporters, at least some of them were pushed towards democracy, not wholly so.
I mean, the country that I've covered more than anywhere else in the last 30 years is Afghanistan, which obviously I'm heartbroken about what's happened. But when the Taliban moved in August 2021, that was the biggest humiliation for NATO in its history. And I personally wondered whether NATO could even really survive as an organisation. And in a strange way, what happened with the full-scale invasion of Ukraine 6 months later by Russia was sort of enabled NATO to re-establish itself. And I was quite taken aback. I did not think NATO would step up to the task in the way that it did. So that actually has been a more positive lesson now. I think we should be doing a lot more if we really care about
it. May in the end be a positive or a negative, I suppose we should say it is still.
But it did show that all of these countries could work together in a way that I thought perhaps they wouldn't be able to.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.